from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me, and the light around me to become night. But even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are the same to you. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. We are complex. Now, it'd be great if we were just simple and if I could just give you an answer, a plug and pull. You have a problem, here's your answer. But it doesn't seem to work that way, nor has it worked that way throughout antiquity. We have embarked on a new sermon series this May, embracing mental health and seeking God's peace in times of struggle. When I thought of this, many people came to my mind and memory. But I was just about to share a few thoughts with you when this psalm just rolls up again, Psalm 139. I believe that it provides and lays a foundation that is worthy of our exploration this morning. It helps us to see how humankind has experienced hope through God throughout the biblical witness, and how we can continue to acknowledge God's calming presence in the midst of all of our struggles. The theme song I've chosen for this series, as you just saw, was Overwhelmed by the Christian band Big Daddy Weave. I think that one word, overwhelm, says it all for so many people today. I would love to have simple answers again to address complex situations. I believe that Psalm 139 alludes to the complexity in which God created humankind. As complex individuals, unfortunately, we need complex responses. In the midst of this complexity, God is in the center of our innermost being, or as this translation says, our inner parts. When I thought about this writer and the author of Psalm 139, we are reminded that this author is reflecting what historically has been one of the struggles that King David had, that this not only historical figure, but I would say this spiritual human figure, this broken figure called David, often seem to struggle with dark places, to struggle with complexities of life. As we explore how these innermost beings could work for us, and as the scripture depicts for us, I believe that one biblical scholar, Ralph Wilson, has described this song, because you remember that the songs were originally sung in worship. He has described this historical King David, this illustrious king in Israel's history, as seeking surrender to God's will. David sought to live life on his terms and has been found lacking at this point in his journey, according to the psalmist. And we are reminded that God did not abandon him, and neither does God abandon us. Even in the midst of chaotic and anxiety-producing times. This phrase of inner parts or innermost beings could be an allusion to God being with us in the depths of our human experiences. That when one feels totally cut off from God, as the Hebrew theology that David depicts through this scripture talks about, he alludes to this place of death. In a more traditional translation, it would have said Sheol, this place where God has abandoned us. Are there any amongst us today, or do we know anyone in our society that feels as though God has abandoned them at some point and at some juncture in their journey? If you do, and I do know persons like that, then this is for them. I believe that as I look at the complexity of our American society and the struggles that persons seem to have and the anxiety-producing times or situations in their lives, one article kind of brings it together for us. In this article, it states that Americans are among the richest people on earth, according to a recent New York Times article. Yet Americans are among the most anxious people on earth. Let that sink in for just a moment. We Americans are among the most richest people on earth, but yet we are the most anxious. How does that balance out? We spend billions of dollars every year on anxiety medications to fund research into the causes and cures for anxiety disorders. A Time magazine cover story was dedicated to teen anxiety, and the headline was, "The kids are all not okay." American teens are anxious, depressed, and overwhelmed, as are many of their adult role models. The article claimed that today's adolescents are the post-911 generation, raised in the era of economic and national insecurity. They've never known a time when terrorism and school shootings were not the norm. Something else to let set in. They've never known a time when terrorism and school shootings, and I would add intrusions and violence in houses of worship, were not the norm. They hit puberty at a time when technology and social media was transforming society. One expert said, if you wanted to create an environment to turn out an anxious people, we've done it. Our culture, our society, our daily activities, the way we structure our lives, the way we experience community or the lack thereof, has created an anxiety-producing culture. One teen has said that we are the first generation that cannot escape our problems at all. We're all like little volcanoes. We're getting this constant pressure from our phones. I know church is one of the few times I don't actually have my phone on me. I have to check when I come in that it doesn't start vibrating. We are constantly being pressured by our relationships and the culture. Think about that again for a moment. Little volcanoes, human beings, adolescents. How many of us more adult or senior persons might also say, we're like little volcanoes? What can it mean in the midst of this activity, this boiling up, if you would, or this submerged anxiety in our lives, when the scripture says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made? I like that phrase. We, you and I, are fearfully and wonderfully made. What could it mean in the midst of that? How could that address this volcanic activity in the midst of many of our lives? I think that this passage and those words could be used to help us find hope and to help us navigate the realities of our day. I didn't say they'd get rid of the stress. I didn't say they'd get rid of the anxiety-causing situations, but they could help us to navigate those channels and those struggles. God's words, fearfully and wonderfully made. Verse 14 of this Psalm 139 speaks to being that type of person. But in the translation that I read, it didn't say fearfully and wonderfully made. It said knit together by God. That's kind of a slightly different view of being wonderfully made. That you're being made in the fashion of a knitted garment, that there are threads that God has placed in each and every one of our lives that makes us something complex, but yet a fabric that when it comes together is unique and is special and is loved by God. Knit together by God. According to biblical scholars, one just has to imagine again this knitting activity of God. Some of those fabrics that would be involved in our lives may be those that leave us susceptible to anxiety and other mental health disorders. But the Bible continues to say that we are still a part of a beautiful fabric made from God's own hands. Chew on that just for a moment. That we are a part of a beautiful fabric. When someone is struggling and not seeing their value in life and thinking that they might have been diminished, try to maybe help them share and embrace that. That, yeah, you might not be perfect. You've made some mistakes. Maybe you might have had some major disappointments, but you are still ultimately a part of this cosmic good that God calls us into with God's self. I believe that God has given us a unique opportunity in our current culture to not just throw our hands up and surrender, as some might imply David did at times, or run away and hide in caves figuratively, but to embrace hope as it appears in different forms. Understanding that all of life's complexity is a part of a cosmic fabric in which every aspect of who we are makes us something wonderful from God's perspective. How can we walk with those who struggle with being overwhelmed by life situations, persons who view themselves as flawed or broken? I recently watched a television show called New Amsterdam, and there are some other people in the church here who watch New Amsterdam, and I hope that no one here hasn't been caught up on their episodes, so I'm not going to take the punchline, but I'm going to allude to a scene where the doctor, the psychiatrist, I should say, has the opportunity to intervene with a teenage male who is been in and out of the series, being hospitalized for different mental struggles and disorders. And this teenager is struggling with having to change his life, again, because of something his mother is about to do. And the teen is rampaging and throwing things and breaking things. And the doctor, in his own careful, loving, meticulous way, calms him down. And then he says to him, "Now, what's really going on here?" And the teen turns to him and says, "You can't fix me. I'm broken. You can't fix me." I'm going to tell you that scene hit me from a personal standpoint as well as a professional standpoint, that there are people in my life, and I know people in our congregation and people in our community who feel as though they are broken. But yet, I believe that God has a response, that we have been called to be God's hands and mouth and to form opportunities to respond to the broken people, the people who feel as though they are broken and can't be fixed. I believe that Psalm 139 affirms that we are complex and that God walks with us, stands with us, and affirms us as we are, even in our brokenness. The words to this sermon series theme song rise up again for me. I see the work of your hands, galaxies spin in a heavenly dance to God. All that you are is so overwhelming. Now, this overwhelming is a good overwhelming, but there are negative overwhelmings. And I think one of the opportunities today and throughout this series and hopefully throughout our ministry together is that we help persons who feel the negative overwhelming to be able to taste and see just a little bit of that hopeful overwhelming that Big Daddy Weave sings about. And God, I run into your arms, unashamed because of your mercy. I'm overwhelmed by you. Are we truly overwhelmed by God today? How do we embrace that spirit of God's mercy? Not God's perfection in us, but God's mercy for us. As I conclude this morning, I want to share a poem I recently read by Gordon Alexander. This poem is entitled, "You're Not Useless." Am I really that useless? That may not be the case. I am just another person within the human race. Everyone has problems. This I know is fact. It's how I deal with them, they say, in other words, how I react. Some persons' brains work differently. This I know to be true. The problems that some people have may not affect me and you. To some, normal stresses can be hard. They can't see their way through. But to others with severe issues, these stresses cannot do. When the mind is struggling so much you cannot see the way ideals bounce around your head, you can't hear what others say. No one has the answers. The mind is so complex, and the smallest things will fester in the minds at our deepest depths. Low self-esteem will set in. Negative thoughts do begin. Try to increase yourself. Believe. And as if you didn't, it will cause grief. Some people can see the light where others just sit in fright. Others always see positive where some just don't want to live. It's easy for others to say, get a grip, be on your way. What you need is a listening ear. Fill your life with positive cheer. So if you're struggling and cannot see, you're not alone. Shout out to me. I'm no professional in this matter, as you are not mad as a hatter. I will listen to your worries and woes, watch your movement from head to toe, as this will help me see what is wrong. Give you the answer that you belong. You deserve to let your mind be free. Give people a chance and you will see. Let them help you through your strife. You can then begin to live your life. I would invite our musical leaders back up at this time. The images of King David and God depicted throughout Psalm 139 can be a guide for us in times of struggle. I believe that Psalm 139 can be a source of hope for us in 2019 and beyond. Willow Hill, we as a community of faith, no musical leaders, communion's coming. We as musical leaders, we as people of faith are called to be lights of hope and beacons of comfort to those in our families, our congregation, in our larger world. I hope you do not think that I present simple answers, because I hope you remember we started with, we have been created complex beings. Yes, the answers to our struggles are complex as well.